Hello, everybody, and welcome back. My continuation of my book reading of the body. Chapter 17, Leeches. The tracks now bent southwest and ran through thick forest. We ate a breakfast of wild fruit. Vern wished aloud for a couple of fried eggs with bacon on the side. This was the last day of the heat, and I think it was the worst of all. By 9 o'clock, the sky was as pale as steel color that made you feel hotter just from looking at it. The sweat ran from our chests and backs and washed away some of the dirt. Insects were a constant annoyance. We knew we still had 8 or 10 miles to walk, but the thing pulled us towards itself and kept us walking fast, even in that heat. We're all crazy to see that boy's body. I can't say it any more simple or honestly than that. We didn't know whether it was going to be harmless or horrible, but we all wanted to see it. It was about 9:30 when Teddy and Chris saw water. They shouted to Vern and me, and we ran over to where they were standing. It was a deep pool which was fed by a little stream which continued under the tracks. "Do you think it's deep enough to swim in it?" Vern asked, looking hungrily at the water. "Well, there's only one way to find out," Teddy said. "Who goes first?" I asked. "Me," Chris said. He went running down the bank, kicking off his shoes and untying his shirt from round his waist as he went. He pushed his trousers down with his thumbs, pulling off his socks, and made a shallow dive. He came up shaking his head to get his wet hair out of his eyes. "It's great," he shouted. "How deep is it?" Teddy asked back. He had never learned to swim. Chris stood up in the water and his shoulders broke the surface. I saw something gray on one of them. I decided it was a piece of mud. I didn't think any more of it. If I had looked more closely, I could have saved myself a lot of bad dreams later on. "Come on in, you pussies," Chris yelled. We all got undressed. Vern was in next, then me. The water was clean and cool. We swam across to Chris, loving the feel of having nothing on except water. I stood up and we grinned in each other's faces. "Great," we both said at the exact same moment. We played around the water for almost half an hour before we realized that the pool was full of leeches. We were diving, swimming between each other's legs, pushing one another beneath the surface of the water. Then Vern swam into the shallower part, went under and stood on his hands. When his legs were up in the air, I saw that they were covered in blackish grey lumps, just like the one I had seen on Chris's shoulder. They were big leeches. Chris's mouth dropped open and I felt all the blood in my body freeze. Teddy screamed and his face went pale. Then all 3 of us made our way as fast as we could from the side. I know more about leeches now than I did then, but although I know they are mostly harmless, I feel the same horror about them now as I have felt ever since that day in the pool. You don't feel them come onto your body. If you don't happen to see them, they'll go on feeding until their swollen bodies fall off you, or they actually burst. We pulled ourselves up to the bank and Teddy started screaming as he looked down at himself. He started to pull the leeches off his bare body, still screaming. Vern broke the water and looked at us in puzzlement. "What the hell's wrong with him?" "Leeches!" Teddy screamed, pulling 2 of his legs and throwing them as far as he could. "Oh God, oh God, oh God," Vern cried. He swam over to the edge of the pool and pulled himself out. I was still feeling cold. The heat of the day was interrupted. I kept telling myself not to scream, not to be a pussy. I picked half a dozen off my arm and several more off my chest. Chris turned his back to me. "Gordy, are there any more? Take them off if they are, Gordy, please." There were more, 5 or 6 of them, running down his back like horrible black buttons. I pulled their soft, boneless body off him. I was starting to feel a little bit better. I brushed my hair away from my ears. And that's when I felt the big one. It had gone down inside my ear, it seemed, so that only its back was still outside, and that's the part I had touched. I tried to get hold of it, but I couldn't see it. I held on to it tightly and pulled. It burst in my fingers as I pulled it off, and blood, my blood, ran down the side of my face and into my ear in a warm stream. I couldn't stop the tears coming in. I washed my ear and got dressed. Vern ran up to me, still bare. "Are they off me, Gordy? Are they all gone?" I spun in front of him like a crazy dancer. I nodded that they were and kept on crying for a while. Finally, the tears began to slow down. When we were all dressed, we stood there, looking at one another for a moment, and then we began to climb the bank up to the tracks. I looked back at the burst leeches lying on top of the flattened grass where we had danced and screamed them off our bodies. And that was the end of chapter 17. Leeches. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.